once again, Internet. My name's Nicole, and this is my fiance Ivan, and we are going to talk about our favorite books from 2014. So, Ivan joined me in the same sort of video for 2013, so he has come back to the vlog after like a 6-month absence to talk about both of our favorite books from 2014. So I have 11 books, and these include comic books and series, and Ivan has 10 things.
Yep. Books. 10 books. 6 legitimate and 4 honorable mentions. There's 6 books that I thought were really awesome, and then 4 that are either good or part of a series, but not necessarily the best book in the series, or, you know, pretty good, but not awesome.
So my arrangement of books doesn't have any particular order in terms of enjoyment. They're ordered in terms of format. So the first things I'm going to talk about are the graphic novels. So first of all, I'm going to talk about Saga, and I read the first 3 volumes this year, or in 2014, this past year now. And I really like the series. A lot of people on BookTube and on the internet in general really like this series. The art is really great, and the story is very entertaining and fast-paced. It is a more mature read, so there's a lot of sex and violence and things, so if you're not into that, it might not be the right choice for you. But I did really enjoy the series overall.
It's pretty good.
Ivan has also read it.
I like it. I'm going to start with an honorable mention. This book is called The Brothers Cabal by Jonathan Howard. It is a book in the series about a very cranky necromancer who has to deal with various issues in his very interesting world. And I like this book a lot. It is, I think, the 4th book in the series on my honorable mentions list because it's not the best book in the series, which would probably be the 3rd one, The Fear Institute. But it's a great series. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of a mix of dark humor and some steampunkish fantasy, and I'd really recommend it.
Yes, and if you watch our video from last year, Ivan had the number 3 book also on his favorites from last year.
Yep.
My next item is the A Bride Story manga series by Kaoru Mori. This is a historical fiction series set in Central Asia, and each book follows a different bride and her story. Actually, the first 2 follow one bride, the middle one follows a second bride, and then the last volumes 4 and 5 follow a pair of twins. And they're kind of love stories, but not really, because so far all of the marriages have been arranged marriages, so they're kind of about fitting into a new family and family dynamics, and a lot about cultural things in the Central Asian region. And they're set in around the turn of the century, around the 1900s. And I really like them. The art in these is fantastic. These probably have the best art of any of the books that I read this year, any of the graphic novels. They're all black and white line drawings, and it's just great. They're really intricate and detailed and amazing.
My next book is an honorable mention. It is a book called Skin Game by Jim Butcher. You might have heard of Jim Butcher. He's pretty famous author, and has a very long-running urban fantasy series about a magician called Harry Dresden who fights various evils and creepy crawlies in his city of Chicago. I liked Skin Game. I like the series overall. I've been reading it for probably 10 years. It's a lot of fun. It's not super serious, but it's very enjoyable. And with any long-running series, it tends to kind of sag and peter out sometimes. I thought Skin Game was great because it was a good return to form to the series. It's a very interesting book. And if you're a fan of Jim Butcher, you should definitely check it out, but you probably already have. And if you're kind of interested in some of the things I've been talking about, you should check out Jim Butcher and sort of start at the beginning of the series and see if you like it, because I think it's a lot of fun.
My last comic is Rat Queens by Curtis J. Wiebe, and the art is by Rock Upchurch. And this is a fantasy, and it's kind of like every time, if you've ever played a tabletop role-playing game, it's like tabletop role-playing games where, like, once your people start to get a little bit of money and a little bit of power, and then you just kind of are like, you know what we're gonna do now? We're gonna go get drunk. It's kind of like that. It's sort of a humorous take on epic fantasy, and it follows this group of 4 ladies who are all mercenaries. My favorite character is probably the cleric right here, who is an atheist cleric to a squid god. because I just think an Aethius cleric is really funny. And I really enjoyed the series. It's really funny. The art is quite good, and I would definitely recommend it if it sounds like something you're interested in.
My next honorable mention for this year is a book called Stardust by Neil Gaiman. You've probably heard of Neil Gaiman. He's a very, very popular sort of fantasy, urban fantasy author. Has written a lot of things, including a fair amount of books. He's written for TV shows like Doctor Who. He's written a book together with Terry Pratchett. Overall, I have mixed feelings about his books. Some of them I like, some of them I don't like as much, but I think Stardust is definitely a very enjoyable book. It follows the adventures of a young man who crosses from the normal world into kind of a fairy world on a grand quest, and pretty lighthearted, quite a lot of fun, very interesting characters, so I'd recommend that you check it out.
Getting into my actual books, one of my favorite books from this year was A Fire Upon the Deep by Vernor Vinge. This is a hard science fiction novel about a alien intelligence and some people who crash land on a planet where there are aliens that are puppies. And I really like the aliens in this series. I also really liked the thought that the author put into it in terms of sort of the evil character, the alien intelligence that's kind of trying to take over. And I thought the world building was very interesting in the way that the author portrays outer space in this book. It is a little bit slower. It's a little bit more of a thinking about it book than like a let's go blow up lots of spaceships kind of book. But they're really cute aliens. Really cute aliens.
I got this. Have you read the sequel? I have a sequel here somewhere.
Yeah, it's up here. I'll read it eventually. Yes, and this is a book that Ivan had been trying to convince me to read for a very long time.
Well, actually, I was trying to convince her to read one of the other books by him, and it's a sort of loosely connected series. I believe it's called A Deepness in the Sky, and this book was very good, and A Deepness in the Sky is like 10 times better. So this book's already amazing, and Deepness in the Sky is like tenfold amazing. So I'd recommend checking. This is Vernor Vinge, I believe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd recommend checking out. My final honorable mention for this video is a book called Judge of Ages by John C. Wright. It's a book that has an interesting premise. A group of super intelligent people are fighting for control of basically humanity over a period of something like 10 million years or 100,000 years, something crazy. They all sort of kind of cocoon themselves in long-term sleep, and they come out from time to time, and they sort of mess with the genetics and the culture and the environment of the planet to in this kind of grand chess game against each other. It's the second book in the series, but it's the only book in the series that I've read. I just thought the premise was very, very interesting. It's a fairly well-written book and pretty fun if you like science fiction stories about sort of post-humanism and development of human beings, kind of in our next stage of social, cultural, or physical evolution. Then you might want to check it out.
Next book that I'm going to talk about is Beloved by Toni Morrison. This is a historical fiction novel that has a paranormal element. It's about a woman and her daughter who live in this house, and the house is haunted by the woman's baby who passed away. Kind of the major theme of the story is about human nature and how we can't escape our past and how that will always kind of catch up with us or follow us around and impact us. And I just thought it was a beautiful book. It is also a much slower book and a deep and emotional book, so I would recommend reading this at a time when you want that sort of emotional and intellectual investment in a book, but it's a great book overall.
Now this is my kind of 6 favorite books of the year that I can remember at the moment, or thought about before preparing this video. So the next book I want to talk about is called The Cuckoo's Calling. It is a book by J.K. Rowling, actually, and it is part of her new sort of series of mystery books following this grizzled war veteran detective, and it's sort of very serious, kind of semi-gritty, very realistic take on the mystery genre, and I really enjoyed the characters in it. I really enjoy the way she writes. She's a very good writer, just from a language perspective and from putting the book together and pacing and story perspective. And I really like the mystery in this one too. Kind of had me going till the end.
My next book is Where the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lin. This is a children's book, and it's sort of a fable about a girl who goes on a quest to meet the old man in the moon and have her wish granted, or her wish fulfilled. I think first of all, the cover on this one is really nice, and there's also some nice little illustrations, so there's nice chapter headings, so these nice kind of prints in the middle, which I think kind of add a lot to this book. If you have children in the reading age for this one, I would definitely recommend picking it up. It's overall just a wonderful, fantastical tale. It has some great morals and messages without being totally like smack you in the face with them, the way a lot of children's books are. But overall, I really enjoyed this one, and I thought it was an excellent read, both for adults and for children.
The Flight of the Silvers by Daniel Price. Kind of an impulse buy for me sometime in the middle of the year. It sounded interesting, and I don't regret it. The book is about a group of people from sort of our normal reality who pass into an alternate reality when our reality is like destroyed by some kind of weird singularity. And basically they're brought over to the alternate reality by some very kind of odd, creepy, like sinister characters for probably the purpose of trying to save that second reality from the same thing that happened to our reality, from the singularity. So it follows the adventures of this group of characters. Each one of them actually has kind of a special power. One person can kind of see the future. One person can slow down time and travel really quickly. One person, who's actually one of the villains of the book, is a person who can jump back in time to a previous time that he experienced, so he can kind of like load his game, as it were, and try things again. And I think it has some very interesting characters and very interesting character dynamics. Has a very interesting story, and overall it's a fun book. It is unfortunately not a standalone book. It looks like it's going to be like the first book in the series, but I would still recommend giving it a read.
So my next book is actually one that I picked up on Audible and listened to as an audiobook, and this is The Martian by Andy Weir. This book actually won the Goodreads Strix Award for Best Sci-Fi Novel this year. It is about an astronaut who gets stranded on Mars. So there's this disaster that befalls his crew on Mars, and they all leave. They think he's dead, and they all leave, and then it turns out he's alive. So it's about him trying to survive on Mars until the next manned Mars mission gets there and can take him back home. The character in this one is very snarky and sarcastic, and if that's not sort of sense of humor you like, it might be one that you want to pass. But I did really enjoy this book. It also is very hard science fiction, has a lot of technical details, and for me personally, that was great because I love those things. And the narrator of the audiobook on this one is really excellent. The book itself lends itself really well to having a narrator because most of it is written as Mark Watney, who's the astronaut, as his journal entries, so it really lends itself well to the audiobook, and the narrator was excellent.
The 1,000 Names by an author called Django Wexler. And kind of in the past couple of years, I haven't been reading a lot of straight-up fantasy or epic fantasy series. I've gotten really tired of fantasy and the general conventions and tropes that kind of keep playing in the genre, but I was bored and didn't really have anything to read, so I grabbed The 1,000 Names, which Nicole got and which was on her shelf, and found myself enjoying it immensely. It's a sort of what might be described as a flintlock fantasy. I've heard that term used a lot recently. Kind of fantasy series set in a time of development that's sort of like equivalent to our 1700s, 1800s. People march around with muskets, and there's gunpowder and some basic technology, and this book kind of details a military campaign taking place in sort of a far corner of an empire, and at the same time there's a parallel story running about sort of various groups of people who want to find a certain magical artifact and exploit it for their own needs. I think it's very well written, very well paced, has some interesting characters. It's fun. It's not too deep, but it's enjoyable and pretty easy to get into. So if you're a fan of fantasy, this one's kind of military oriented, but if you enjoy that sort of thing, I would definitely recommend picking this up.
The next book on my list is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is kind of a science fiction classic. It's about a man who is from this conglomerate of different planets, and he travels to a new planet that's been discovered that has human life on it. But the life on this planet, the planet is called Winter, is a little bit different for a couple of reasons. Number one, winter, as the name suggests, is very, very cold, so everything is adapted to the cold. And the humans who live on this planet are different in that they are hermaphroditic, so most of the time, like 28 days out of a month, they are not sexually active, and then they go through a short phase where they're sexually active, and they can be either male or female at that time. And so it explores a lot of interesting things in terms of gender roles, but I think the real reason why I like this is that it was just overall a really good story about Gently, who's the main character, and his involvement in the politics on this planet and the way he reacted to the hermaphroditic people and what was going on the planet. And overall, I just really enjoyed this book and would definitely recommend it.
Another book that I really enjoyed this year is a book called The Magician's Land. This is the third book in the series by author Lev Grossman, who kind of explores the life and adventures of a young magician kind of from our world who goes off to a secret magic school somewhere. And if that sounds a little bit familiar and reminds you of the Harry Potter books a little bit and a bunch of other books, I think that's kind of intentional. This is sort of a very, in a sense, kind of a subversive series of books. The magician in question is older. He starts going to the school around high school, college age, and it deals with a lot of themes of kind of growing up, finding your own identity in the world. It's a lot more, it's a lot less happy fun times adventure and more kind of dark realistic take on choices and consequences, on sort of relationships and broken relationships, and this final book was an excellent capstone to the end of the series, kind of capping both the main character's journey and development as well as the plot and what's going on with him and this kind of magical land that he has access to.
The next book that I'm going to talk about is In the Shadow of the Banyan Tree by Vedi Ratner. This is a historical fiction novel set in Cambodia, and it follows a young girl who's a princess in Cambodia when the Khmer Rouge take over. And I didn't know that much about the Khmer Rouge going into this book, and so it was very interesting in terms of like historical facts and learning more about that time period in Cambodia's history that I really didn't know that much about. And it was also just really well written, and so even though there's these really terrible things happening that the Khmer Rouge are doing, the author does a good job of balancing that by telling a lot of the myths and legends from Cambodia and by describing the land of Cambodia and making it sound incredibly beautiful, so that it's kind of balancing the past of this country and what they hope for in the future with what is happening at the time, which is really horrific.
I seem to be doing a lot of series this year. I guess I just haven't had that much time to read, so I've mostly been tracking along with authors that I really like and series that I really like. But I'm happy to have read the next installment in one of my favorite series called a book called The Wolf in Winter by author John Connolly. And this is one of his books. This is a book called The Black Angel, which is an amazing book and probably the best book in the series so far. But I really enjoyed Wolf in Winter as well. The series itself follows kind of a private detective and some of his friends and associates that get involved in various sort of investigations, various mysteries, often having to do with some very, very bad people, kind of kidnappers, serial killers, and the like. And there's also a very strong Well, actually, there's also sort of a flavor of a paranormal element going through the series and all of the books. It's never really overt or in your face like a lot of urban fantasy series, so I'd hesitate to describe this as urban fantasy exactly. It's more of a thriller series with some slight supernatural overtones. If you're interested in the series, I would actually suggest starting with Black Angel. I know it's in the middle of the series, but this is the book I've started with, and it really demonstrates all the characters and the style, and one of the more significant kind of events and mysteries that this group of people explores.
My next book is The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. This is a standalone high fantasy novel, which is kind of unique in that there aren't a lot of standalones written in that genre. It follows Maya, who is half elf and half goblin, and he is the son of the emperor, but he's the fourth son, and he's out of the emperor's favor. He hasn't even seen his father in like 10 years. And so he never really expects to become the emperor, but then a event happens where his dad and his older brothers all die, and he becomes the emperor because he's the next in the line of succession. And it follows a lot of political intrigue because a lot of people expect Maya to be a weak emperor and kind of want to manipulate him, and a lot of people just would rather he wasn't there and they took over, and they're trying to kill him. And overall, I found Maya was just such a wonderful character. He was very well developed, and he was totally out of his depth, but found ways to deal with that. And overall, I just really enjoyed this book and thought it was an excellent fantasy book.
Now I've come to my last book on the list, and even though the list before this wasn't any particular order, I would say that this is definitely by far the best book I have read all year. This book is called Tiger Man by author Nick Haraway. If you remember me talking any of past sessions, you might have remembered me mentioning that author. He wrote another book I really like called Angel Maker, and he's a great author and definitely still with it because he delivered an amazing book. Tiger Man is a more serious fiction type of book. It follows a British retired army sergeant who actually becomes sort of deputy British ambassador to an island that was formerly kind of in the British Empire but is now independent. But really the most of the focus of the book is about him and his friendship with a young boy who's a native of the island. And the boy kind of pushes him to become more proactive in helping solve some of the island's problems, and kind of pushes him to actually don a disguise and become this sort of almost like comic book-like hero called Tiger Man. It's a wonderful book. The characters are wonderful, the relationships are wonderful, that friendship that they focus on is amazing. The tone is mostly serious, but Nick Haraway is a fairly humorous author. He puts a lot of humor into his work, so it's kind of, while serious, it's also very lighthearted at times and very funny at times, but also very sad at times. I think it's an amazing, complex story. If you read one book in the coming year, and if I can make a recommendation, I would definitely recommend Tiger Man. It is an amazing book.
Okay. And the last thing that I am going to mention is that I reread Harry Potter this year, and my favorite book changed from the fourth book to the sixth book. And that is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. So I was a little bit surprised at the change, and I'm sure everybody knows what Harry Potter is about. If you haven't read Harry Potter, you should do that. And if you read Harry Potter as a kid and you have great fond memories of it, it might be time for a reread, because I found some new and interesting things going on in the series that I kind of hadn't noticed or hadn't clued in on when I was younger and I read the series. But that is it for us. Those were our favorite books from 2014. And we will see you later. Ivan will see you next year. Maybe some point in between here and there. Bye!
Bye.
Should we say hello to your grandma? Since your grandma watches the videos.
Hi, Grandma.